All
Hello,
right.
Mrs. Lieberman.
We've already
How
said
are
happy
you?
birthday. We've said happy birthday to me on Monday. I turned 44 and I just realized I hadn't pressed the record button. And any conversation with Nate is worth recording from the start. So tell us, just
You
say
know,
happy.
it's really a cultural technology observation that some of my best, most amazing conversations with people like you and Daniel Schmachtenberger and Tristan Harris and some of my ecologist friends are offline and the record button isn't on. And I'm like,
Totally.
God dang it, I wish we'd recorded that. And then and then you hit record and you've had a bad day and it's just kind of like, okay, we're supposed to do a podcast now. But yeah, I was just telling you about a recent meeting with a family member of mine who's in his early 80s. And he was complaining about some health problems. I'm like, knowing what I know, dude, you won the lottery. You have children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. You've seen the world. You've lived during this enormous, anomalous period of energy and GDP explosion for our species and our culture. And yes, I mean, dying is part of living. And as you get old, it's inevitable. But, you know, Barry, we record this on the eve of Thanksgiving in the United States. And Thanksgiving had some inauspicious beginnings to it, but it has morphed into a 2-day vacation from work where we eat a lot of food and meet with family and watch football and just kind of relax and reflect and then do some shopping, many of us. But gratitude, like true thanks and gratitude for the time that we're alive right now, it doesn't happen that often. And I think gratitude of all the spectrum of human emotions is an important one because if you're grateful, then it widens your perspective of empathy and appreciation and behavior change and everything. So I am worried about the future, and I know we're going to get into that on this series, but I'm also very grateful for the present. And I think it's important to not lose sight of that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, Nate. I was talking the other night in our MBE, our Masters of Business and Empathy program we run, which is an
Oh,
alternative
I never heard
behavior.
of that. That's great.
Yeah, it's an
I mean,
MBE, and I
empathy is at the core of what we really need is to widen the boundaries of what we care about and how we think about it. I mean, empathy is such a vital bridge to livable futures, Barry. I didn't know you were doing that.
yeah, yeah. My husband Danny sort of designed it and co-designed it with some of our amazing colleagues, and we've been running it now. It's going into its third year, and the people who are coming to do it are CEOs of major organisations around the world. Excuse my voice. I'm losing my voice. I don't know if that's like an like meta thing, but I feel fine. I just have a funny voice.
No, you sound like Demi Moore. It's fine. Keep going.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
I did a
Yeah, and
Frankly podcast last night, and my voice sounded just like yours because I yelled at my dog because he chased the school bus, and I screamed at him for 3 minutes, and then I had to do a podcast. But I also feel fine. So carry
I
on.
love it. Yeah. Um, and I just did a presentation the other night, and I was talking about just from the questions that were being asked. I was kind of talking about, for me, I have strong opinions, but lightly held, because
Mm.
the thing that really drives me, the reason I'm like super excited to see you this morning, other than you're a rad human, is that I'm just so curious. My curiosity drives me out of myself, and I'm always trying to put myself in situations of empathic stretch,
So
just
so
to stretch those muscles.
so you said three things there that I think are interrelated. One is we started this about empathy, but then you mentioned curiosity, and then you mentioned that you have strong opinions, which are presumably on average over time science tethered, but you hold them lightly, which means that you're able to change your mind, and you're able to learn, and you're able to learn from other perspectives and listen to other perspectives. And in the aggregate of those three things, curiosity, empathy, and a probabilistic view of the future, like it's the future and what we should do and what the problems are, they are not binary. They are not 0 or 1. There's a spectrum, and there's lots of things, and our situation is horribly complex and nuanced. So I think having empathy, being curious, but holding your opinions lightly is kind of the name of the game, Barry.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I'm really looking forward to getting into the meat of this conversation. I mean, we can have our conversation because I want you to just sort of go deeper into the pro-social stuff that you've been working on. But quite frankly, there's a pun here. It's not really a pun, but everyone should just listen to and watch on YouTube your Franklies, and they're really great. They're sort of short clips on deep issues, like juicily done, a quick grab. And your one on Jekyll and Hyde, it kind of like sums up the whole thing, and then peace out. I just feel like drop the mic. Let's just watch that on repeat and remind yourself every morning. So we're going to be going into that today. And if I'm honest, like, why I had the record button off when we started, because I wanted to be really personal. I kind of wanted to talk about what I'm going through at the moment, and I wanted to ask you a couple of personal questions, which gives you a different tenor to the conversation, right? Because there's the conversation you share, and then there's the real conversation behind closed doors, and I think that's happening a lot in the world.
So let's just pause it right there, Barry, because that's something I struggle with as well. There are manufactured conversations on the internet and the media that say the correct things that will land with people in the socially acceptable way, because humans are social, eusocial, which means very incredibly social creatures. And we use social sorting mechanisms currently to solve physical world problems. We have a room of 100 people, and there's a high status woman or man that's leading the conversation, and we defer to her or him and look around. Are other people deferring? And so the fact that some of my best conversations are when the camera is turned off is because we can be totally honest.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Humans
Make
are
mistakes and work it out, and like be real, and it's really hard to be real right now because there's a strong cultural police out there just trying to make sure that we say the accepted thing or the acceptable thing or I think it's really gnarly because we've never needed to be more real with each other, and there's more in the way in some ways than ever before.
I totally agree. Where I was going with that is I'm human, and by definition, I'm delusional because my identity comes over my truth. And so sometimes the left brain is not aware of what the right brain is doing. And we have these narratives that we tell each other that are socially conforming. So even when I'm sitting by myself in a room, I only tell myself 90% of the truth, unbeknownst to me. When I'm with my very best friend in the world, I will tell 80% of the truth because I know she has some hot buttons on a couple issues. When I'm in a room of 8 people, my colleagues, close friends, I'll tell 70% of the truth because one of them just had a family tragedy and I don't want to upset her by bringing up this issue. When I'm in a presentation to 300 people, I can only tell 50% of the truth because some of these things are too threatening or too obscure or too, emotionally charged. Can you imagine the Prime Minister of Australia or the President of the United States in an auditorium of 100,000 people? The more people involved in a conversation, the less actual truth you can say without risk of ostracization or cancellation or something. But I do think our culture, and I can't speak for Australian culture, but the United States culture is kind of starved for authenticity and truth because they feel deeply inside the bullshit coming from both the left and the right. And so, yeah.
Well, I mean, I would also, we'll get into this. I mean, I feel like I'm in constant conversation with you because I am literally talking to you in my head sometimes. And then I listen to the podcast and then we're doing our work because our work has so much like fundamental crossover. But that Jekyll and Hyde issue, talking about Dr. Jekyll and how he can plan for a good future, and Mr. Hyde, kind of the comfort and convenience that Mr. Hyde longs for. I as a person, like, I noticed that I have like a superpower that's also my Achilles heel, which is the thing I find most healing and nourishing is an honest conversation where truth can be sniffed at and kind of like a truffle uncovered with our snouts. If we're digging hard enough, we can kind of smell it, and if we're lucky enough, taste it. But it's kind of like a funky smell and it's a weird taste. Like, it's a rare thing. And I think we have to get really good at finding. And
I love truffles,
and
by
I
the
really
way, but
love
keep
it.
going.
I love truffles.
I
And
love mushrooms.
Truth and authenticity.
I hunt for mushrooms every spring and every fall, and it's like nothing, mushroom, and it's like this big burst of dopamine. But go on.
Oh my God. I love that, but I'm a little bit too Jewish to enjoy the mushroom hunt because I'm like, we're all going to die. We're just all going to die.
Are there
If we eat the mushroom, we're gonna
deadly
die.
poisonous mushrooms in Australia?
Yeah, there's deadly poisonous everything here. It's just
Oh
how we roll.
yeah. No, more. There's deadly poisonous more things where you are. Here, there's just mushrooms, and I know the two kinds that are deadly.
You guys have guns though, mate. So it's like,
Exactly. There's more guns than people here. And if I go far enough
Yeah.
north, there are bears and wolves. But where I live, there's cars, other people, and some mushrooms.
Yeah, cars, other people, guns, mushrooms. But you can come here and we do pine. I'll eat a pine mushroom, but with enormous trepidation, intergenerational. Just
Pine mushrooms,
trauma.
matsutakis.
Yeah.
Oh, those are really rare
Don't
here,
say
and they sell for a.
biological.
Yeah, I like pine mushrooms. I've only found one though.
You're nerding out. You're nerding out by giving me the
Yeah, I
the
am
proper
kind of a
name.
nerd,
But yeah,
Barry.
big nerds are my favorite people. Yeah, big fat juicy pine mushrooms. So you come here in pine mushroom season and you can just have dopamine rushes everywhere you go.
All kidding aside, because I know we have to get to the meat of this conversation, which is human behavior. But if I ever do come to Australia, and I've never been there, I would like to coordinate my trip to pine mushroom season because that would be a really highlight for me.
Done.
If Australian
Done.
pine mushrooms are the same as Canadian pine mushrooms, but
Now I feel under pressure, and that's part of the human behavior thing. I'm comparing myself to Canada. I'm stressed in anticipation of your visit.
it's so true.
I want
though.
it to live up to your pine mushroom.
One of our, no matter who we are or how old we are or how well we know each other or how little we know each other, we compare ourselves to others. It really is a
I know.
human thing.
Okay, so look, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about human behavior and why it's such a distinct piece in your systemic overview.
Yes.
For me too. The latest issue of Dumbo Feather is actually, it covers so much of what we just discussed. It's got 86-year-old Sylvia Borstein, the mindfulness Buddha Dharma teacher, and Beyond Ego. So, you know, that's a pretty good person to orient towards and pertinent to our next bit of our conversation.
Excellent. I don't know her, but I've heard of her work. So, do you want to press record or
Oh, we're recording. We recorded all of
Oh,
that.
we're recording. All right. Excellent.
Yeah. Because I didn't ask you the more personal questions I was going to ask you, but maybe
You can go ahead, and
we'll turn the
I'll
recording off in a bit.
defer if I'm too shy or embarrassed. You can ask me the
No,
personal
that's
question.
that's okay. I'll ask you later. That's okay. But Now everyone's wondering what the personal question is, but I have so much has happened since we last spoke, and I think that we could segue into all of these things, but I think if we can wrap them in to that one question, which is what I want to center our conversation around, which is why is human behavior a distinct piece in your systemic overview? Let's just go there.
Yes. So, Barry, my understanding is we're going to have a 5 or 6 part series. We already talked about the kind of the overview of the situation, which is we need to continue economic growth to let the financial markets and give people the things that they expect. But that is having a huge impact on the natural world, not only climate change, but lots of other things, but also that the energy and materials required for that are probably not available. And so where do we go from here? And I've spent a lot of time, and both personally with scientists and with my students, talking about the human behavior problem, part of the problem, because we don't so much face an economic crisis or an environmental crisis as a mismatch of our evolved Stone Age minds effectively with a modern, resource-intensive, technology-rich culture. So human behavior, understanding the human brain as individuals and as 8 billion of us in a modern culture, is critical to figuring out paths forward for 2 reasons. Number one is our aggregate human behavior has brought us to this point and created this situation. And number 2 is who we are as biological organisms informs what pathways forward there are. So it's not a technology problem that we face. It's not an environmental problem we face. It's a mismatch of how we go through our daily lives trying to get the same emotional states of our great-great-great-great-great-grandcestors who lived on the Pleistocene in Sydney or New York City with all this technology and stuff. So maybe I could break down the part of this conversation into those 2 pieces. How we got to this problem and what does it mean for going forward? Yes?
Yeah. Yes, do it. I mean, I've been breaking down because I've been like thinking about this a lot and also experiencing it because I live inside. I'm still playing the game, you know, the game. I wrote it down here. Wait, I just want to refer to how I wrote it down about the game because I've been like obviously Sam Bankman-Fried, effective altruism, crypto. Potential of nuclear war, Russia, Ukraine, the US, all the things that you've been talking about, and then thinking about the economy and the game and how I've been trying to all of us really, we're inside the fishbowl, we're fish in the water, and then there's the game, and then there's how to be conscious of your actions and your behavior in the game, and then that's just the game of now, and then there's the game that came before us. So I'm confusing everyone. You take us.
So what you're kind of talking about is something called metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about how we think. So all of us think, and then learning why the evolutionary psychology of who we are allows us to think about how we think. And that itself isn't powerful enough to change our behaviors, but there's like a little Barry on your shoulder observing your behavior and giving kind of a play-by-play during the day, kind of like a conscience. So we
and then
evolved.
And then just to say, there's also what happened in one of your previous amazing conversations. I think it was maybe Ursula Le Guin was quoted as saying, or someone great was quoted as saying, you can't have right answers to wrong questions. And it's just trying to ask myself the right questions, but that's a consciousness thing as you evolve in your thinking. And sorry, Nate, I'm segueing. Apologies. I know you want to take us to structured conversation.
I want to take us wherever you want to go, Barry. I'm just here.
Well, I just want to say that, like, I can't help asking shit questions. Like, I ask a lot of shit questions. I spiral around shit questions. And anyway, I think I spiral around shit questions because of human behavior.
They're not shit questions
so
because if you have those questions, lots of other people have the questions as well. The
yeah.
only problem with this format is I have 45 hours of material in the human behavior section of my course, and we have 1 hour to cover human behavior. That's the shit problem. But the questions are important, so go ahead.
Well, when I was distilling because you've got your frame around human behavior. No, I'm going to shut up. You talk. What were you going to say?
I was just going to answer your question, but if you're asking me to outline the why we've arrived at this point, there are several aspects of human behavior that are relevant. First of all, we care about the present. We care about this weekend much more than next weekend. And we care about next weekend much more than a year from now. And so all of our behaviors as biological organisms are front-loaded, and emotionally, we don't really care about the future. Cognitively, we can imagine the future, and we can make great plans to change our behaviors, to use dental floss and lose weight and read more books and save the environment starting tomorrow. But then when we wake up tomorrow, the next day has become tomorrow. And so there's this dynamic inconsistency on the time scales of the challenges we face and our behaviors. That's one point. Another, as I mentioned earlier, is we're incredibly social. And so we compare ourselves to others. And therefore, in the biological world, relative fitness matters much more than absolute fitness. So even though on average people in Australia or the United States are vastly materially richer than Australians or Americans a couple generations ago, we still don't feel that richness because we're comparing ourselves to the people that are high status men and women in our culture today. And we're getting signals in the media that you don't have this, you suck. If you buy this, you can live like them. And we're constantly feeling like we don't have enough, even though materially in an absolute sense, we're one of the richest generations ever to live. So we, like other biological organisms, compete for status. And our status of our current world is pecuniary, material objects and signals. Another aspect of our behavior that has brought us here is optimal foraging theory. Animals, a cheetah, and we're going to talk about this in the future about energy, but an animal will chase a prey and try to chase the best prey for the amount of energy expended. And we're the same thing. We look for 2-for-1 deals and half off at happy hour and bargains. And we try to maximize our own caloric footprint, which is measured in dollars or yen or euros or whatever. So we're all trying to grow. And the growth of the system is tethered to energy and other things. And we don't necessarily get satisfied when we go to the store and buy something. That gave us the near-term dopamine and neurotransmitters, but that quickly dissipates and we want something different or better or more next week, which is why my storage shed where I live is 10 foot by 20 foot. It's chock full of all the things I've bought in the last 20 years, and I pay $100 a month just to keep it there, and I haven't opened the frickin' thing in 4 months. Another aspect of our behaviors is that in our ancestral environment, things were relatively stable. And then once in a while, you would see a flash of color in the woods or a movement, and that would correlate with resources and that would generate dopamine. Now we have Candy Crush and emails and Zoom calls and YouTube videos and all kinds of Overwatch shoot 'em up games. And the technology we have today gives us supernormal stimuli which is targeted neurochemistry orders of magnitude more intense than what our ancestors experience. And what ends up happening is that hijacks our attention away from our real life and the kind of slow pace of our ancestors with growing food or singing a song or just sitting idly under the sun and letting the wind blow our hair and letting your mind wander. Our technology is pulling us away from those human timescale things. Another aspect that has brought us to this precipice is we're very tribal. We grew up anthropologically in bands of 100 to 150 people on the plains of Tanzania and Africa. And that tribe, that band was our life. And we cooperated within that band. We banded together to stave off other tribes or protect from leopards and threats. And so that machinery still resides in our brains today, that we are intensely protective of our tribe. Could be the Australian rugby team versus the Kiwi rugby team, could be a political party, could be a country, could be any sort of thing that we defend our group against the other group. And there's a lot of other aspects of our evolved human behavior that have manifested in 8 billion people cooperating and competing in order to generate profits. The profits are tethered to energy. Energy is tethered largely to fossil energy, which we're depleting 10 million times faster than it was sequestered. And the whole system is optimized for growth. And this growth, of course, growth.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on. So point number. So what I've written is, number one, we care about now more than the future.
Yeah.
Number two, we are social. Therefore, comparison is kind of everything. It's a meta lens over how the quality of our life. Number three, optimal foraging. We maximize our own gain and growth, which is tethered to energy in this economy. Number four, hyperstimuli. Targeted neurochemistry hijacks our attention away from actual life and human timescale. And then number five, we're tribal. So we defend our group against the other group. And that is tethered to energy as well. Is that what you're saying? Tethered to growth?
No, that's like.
Or we're cooperating. We're cooperating. Sorry.
That's a separate
what you're
point.
saying is,
Yeah. The
is it a
tribe
separate
right
point or
now.
the same point?
The tribe right now is the religion right now is economic growth, where all countries and all institutions are cooperating towards growth. But a subset of that is people care about social justice or climate change or nationalism or whatever it is. And so those tribes argue with each other. And the reason that the tribal part matters here is we can't have a civil, science-based conversation about the real issues on the planet because identity matters more than truth, which is a separate point. We are...
Wait.
Yeah, that's a separate point.
Wait. So, well.
Kind of
is it
separate
Is it in
point.
the seven? Like
Yeah,
it's in the 7 points.
well, this is the bane of my existence. Is I have too many points.
Yeah, no, I get it. And like everyone just go to Wisconsin and study with Nate. I mean, that's the moral of this conversation. But
no, there's lots of videos online that you can learn from. It's hard to parse it, but it's a central point that humans only recently in our history invented language, and so that we can, with our mouths, create millions of more word combinations that sound good to other people that are disconnected from physical reality. Like if I said,
So
there's a
wait, just stop, just wait. This is amazing. So this has come up twice in 2 days. The abstraction of language has come up for me twice in these last 2 days. So I just want to hang there for 1 second, because one of the things that spun me out when I was studying Steiner education for children, which is Rudolf Steiner's Kingdom of Childhood, there's a whole philosophy there. One of the like wackier aspects, which I as an artist found really, really fascinating, was that he wasn't a big fan of teaching children to read and write in the first years of their life. He tethered it to like actual physical development and neurological development, because he argued that the written letters and like particularly reading and writing was so abstract and untethered to reality, meaning the world and the wind in your hair and on your face and the sun rising and setting and chickens in the field and growing a plant and caring for the earth, that he was like, wait until they've developed as ecological beings first, who are tethered to their nervous system, and their nervous system is tethered to the world, the actual world around them. Then later they can learn abstract language like A, B, C, D, E if you speak English, because otherwise we're forcing abstraction on them before they are real in the world. And that one of his arguments was that has caused the abstract world we've created, because we've been forcing formation before we've untethered ourselves from the real world in every way. And it kind of goes back to even language itself. So anyway, I find that fascinating.
I'm not familiar with his work, but yeah, I agree with that. I hadn't heard it before. There's another part, which is the internet is 24/7 available for anyone to find something, and they Google what they believe in and they find something that verifies what they believe in. But, if I said, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking on that issue of tribal, what you're saying, that you can Google and find anything that you believe in, and then religion now is economic growth, but then there's also like the left and the right, and we're all in our silos. But I wonder on that point, my question was, do you reckon that this split in society, this us and them, this further like entrenchment into our tribal bubbles, is a factor of economic growth? Like we've kind of driven ourselves to this point that we're actually all disagreeing with each other as an outcome of the economy itself?
Yeah, yes and no. I think on the upslope, when we were growing at 5 or 6% a year, our disagreements didn't matter. And now, because everyone had access, the rising tide would lift all boats. But now that things are gotten tougher and there's more wealth and income inequality, and some people are really suffering, then the identity and the different tribes are being blamed for what's happening.
Yes.
But just my point before, though, is if I were to tell your listeners and you that a 100-foot-long fluorescent green platypus was flying over Sydney and Perth and Melbourne, and every time it would see a white car, it would swoop down and eat the car. That is a total fantasy proposal, but I was able to temporarily have your listeners visualize that in their mind for the first time. And there are so many propositions like that floating around the internet that we don't have ecology and energy and systems education in our system. So if something sounds good, like we will be able to live off 100% renewables and save the climate and the Great Barrier Reef while continue to consuming at today's levels, that sounds good. I'm going to believe that story. So there's lots of stories that sound good, but are biophysically implausible. So that's part of the challenge of the human propensity to believe things that conform to their pre-existing beliefs. In other words, we don't have a vector for a civil discussion of the left, the right, the center, using a biophysical science tethered description of our human ecosystem. That's not happening right now globally.
I get it, and I'm a little bit fucked up by it because, I'm like, I'm whatever amount of IQ points less than a Daniel Schmachtenberger. So I can't, like, it takes me... I've got a lot of, what do you call it? Mr. Hyde. I've got a lot of Mr. Hyde in me. Comfort and convenience, and a sort of like, yeah, I like the comfort version of the story. We can have it all and eat our cake and have it all, and like we have enough time to pivot. And I'm an impact investor, so I was like, rad! I'm just going to pivot 100% of my portfolio to the next economy. It's going to be renewable. Everything I've invested in has been with the hope that all boats rise with the tide of the next economy, and we'll be right, mate. Like, she'll be right. Those of us who pivot to the next economy... It's
Nate, actually, but go on.
Oh, funny. Did you... Nate. She'll be right, Nate. And you totally baffled me for a minute. I was in flow. I was like, what? Did I call him something else?
I'm sorry.
And... and I think that for me, I'm definitely in this moment. Maybe I'm right here in maybe points 6 and 7, which you're going to tell us in a second. But I'm still in the it's just hard to catch up. Like, you can only catch up at the place that you can catch up, like consciousness itself, like an individual's consciousness, my own awareness of the situation we find ourselves in. I'm always late to the party. I'm like really far ahead, and then I'm late to the party. And then I'm all in on like next economy and impact investing. And then I go, wow, it's so much harder than that. And yeah, that's great, but that's like point 1. Like, if everyone, I thought when I heard people, planet, profit, when I heard we could do triple bottom line investing and stay stay in the economy as it is, but like put acupressure points in it, weave through the medicine, we could like pivot the whole economy to a next economy. We could hospice the old and midwife the new, and she'll be right, Nate, and it's going to be okay. And I can tell my kids it, but it's becoming more and more dire, faster and faster. I thought we had a longer runway. I thought we had like my lifetime to go really hard doing that. And I thought when we said triple bottom line, like I saw an inconvenient truth. I thought, okay, fuck that shit. I don't want that for my kids and grandkids or yours or anyone's. Like, let's pivot. People, planet, profit. All in favor say aye. Let's go. I'm like, we are done. We have solved this. And of course, like, I just couldn't have factored in the complexity because I didn't have access to more information. Plus, I didn't want to fall into nihilism. And that was my actionable. Like, the actionable was, I'll take everything I have, all my resources, and I'll pivot them into this like much better proposition. The best one that was in front of me at the time, which is what to do with capital. Like, what is the purpose of capital? I can tell you now that I have an answer. The purpose of capital is to be in service of life. That feels really rich to me.
That is the core statement of our time.
So then
you've never conveyed that to me, but that a lot of capital is a terrible thing to waste, and to be ultimately in service of life, what you have to think 2 and 3 steps ahead. And I'll let you finish your statement. I hear what you're saying, and I think for me to say the energy, economy, metabolism part, that's what we're going to talk about next time. But go on. I was following you.
Well, sorry everyone for the coughing. It's like super annoying for me too. But like, we just have to have this conversation, and I want to have it with you, right? To say that we're in this kind of fucked paradigm where we fucked ourselves over, but like maybe it started with language itself. Like, as you said, it's not our fault that we are here. And that's pretty important, I think, because we have to hold all these paradoxes of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in all of us, in the collective us. And I've been just talking about me for a second as like an example. It's so the multipolar traps that you and Daniel and I've talked about on my podcast, like this 3-dimensional Rubik's Cube that we're trying to solve for, which, like you said the other day, if that bomb in Poland had resulted in actual nuclear confrontation between the US and Russia, like all the pro-social stuff we're talking about, all the steps to understanding ourselves and solving better are moot. Like, it's game over, and I hope you've got a veggie patch and some chickens, because we're, you know, the Third World War, as Einstein said, will be fought with sticks and stones. Or the world after the Third World War would be sticks and stones. Fuck it, I don't know. That sort of like very rapid reduction in our capacity. So I'm talking about my own capacity to understand as an individual with high agency and act. The rules keep shifting. The game keeps shifting. Or the more that because I wrote here, like, the game. I wrote it as the game because Danny and I have been talking about the game, right? Like, we've been actors in the economy, the hospicing, the midwifing, but the more and more we're in there, and that you see the Sam Bankman-Fried, like, I've had dinner with crypto billionaires, like, the fact that the emperor had no clothes was super apparent, and I'm like, what is everyone doing, giving their money to men with psyches of 11-year-old boys who are like, give your money to me because I'm the next economy, and it has no regulation, and those bad actors and grown-ups who are trying to rob us of our future won't be able to in the crypto world. Like, it's a constantly shifting dynamic, and it's like impact investing, none of it matters. None of it's going to make the difference. It's sort of I don't know. I know I'm talking zero-sum game, but I'm just like sitting in this going, the game itself is rigged. Some of us thought we could go in and shift it with some medicine, but because of our human behavior, because of these 7 aspects of human behavior, of which I am a massive culprit, like comparison, consumption, growth, competition, identity, confirmation bias. Like,
we're all massive culprits, all of us. That's who we are
but then
as a species.
but then it freezes me. Like, then I get frozen because I spent 20 years, the last 20 years of my life, my husband's life, our family's life, kind of like really, because you even had a go at me last time. You're like, you're too positive. You're too upbeat. And I kind of like can't do anything if I don't feel pro-social for the future.
I don't think, did I really say that? I don't think I said that. I think we need upbeat, cheerful, positive people, but they have to understand our reality. Things got very late quite soon in our situation. And, you know, to reflect on what you just said, you shouldn't apologize for having a lower IQ than Daniel Schmachtenberger, or care about convenience and comfort and the short term and your tribe and the things you care about. That's all of us. That's 99% of us. And that's why you're a dear human being, because you're saying and processing exactly what you're feeling. We're going to get to some of the quote unquote solutions, but we still haven't unpacked the problem. Those 7 things can be summarized as: we are a biological organism that is a product of evolution, not only our bodies, but our brains. And when the agricultural revolution happened, we stopped the hunter-gatherer way of living when we didn't have any wealth, because we moved around every few months and we could only take what we could carry with us. And then we started to grow agriculture and amass surplus. And the surplus was stored, and then we would trade it with other people and other groups for things. And then we had to have warriors and accountants and priests and these other occupations fast forward 10,000 years till the 18th century, when we puzzled out how to get this enormously powerful fossil energy and minerals from the ground, and that turbocharged the whole thing. So you're absolutely right to say that this is not your fault. This is not anyone's fault. But once we understand it, we're all complicit towards playing a role in our collective future. And the reason that human behavior is not only important to understand on how we got to this point, but what would a more sustainable, more realistic future human civilization, culture, interaction with each other in the natural world look like. We don't get happier or higher well-being with more money and resources after basic needs are met. The latest study is you get massive increases in health and well-being when you have nothing, up to around 60 or 70,000 US dollars per year, after which you get very little hedonic increase in well-being and benefits from more at that level. You get a little bit because it's status and other things. But if you only make $10,000 a year, moving up to 50,000 is a huge increase in your benefits. So we don't need all this stuff. A lot of us this is just a rat race to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians. So some future society.
So I love that. I love that. I get it. There's a lot of imagining to this future society. I love that game as well. Try comparing yourself to someone living 100 years in the future, but it's got to be like, that's a hard vision to have that's positive at the moment. Like, oh, hope we're not wearing.
What do you mean by positive?
Okay, wait. Before, well, no, that future visioning is really important. I want to get to points 6 and 7 on the 7 aspects of human behavior because we're still moving through that. But I just want to flag that I think my overarching question that I was just muddling through in life is, how do we play the right role commensurate with our sense making and our agency? That is where I'm at.
Okay.
Where I'm like,
so,
So
this is a non-linear conversation because we haven't talked about energy, money, the economy, and the environment yet. But this is my belief.
All right.
My understanding is we have to do 3 things simultaneously. We have to educate more and more people about the systemic predicament that humans face. Education. More people, wider education on all this stuff. We also have to focus on inner development, like you were saying, the Steiner stuff of the human potential. We're not consumers, we're humans, and we are capable of so much more than we're exhibiting right now in our lives because we're just enslaved by the game, as you and your husband call it, which is the economic system. When we talk about energy, I'm going to claim that we've outsourced our decision making to the anonymous market system, and that market system is now more powerful than philanthropists or politicians or anyone. So we have to focus on the inner development of spiritual, emotional, psychological of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of humans. And then the third path is we'll need to change the infrastructure of how we live because we cannot continue to live at 190 billion light bulbs worth of energy, which is what the global economy uses. And most of that is based on fossils. So we're going to have to live more locally. We're going to have to substitute community and social capital for what we currently see as financial capital and stuff. And we're going to have different infrastructure relationships for all the things that energy gives us, like heat and food and manufacturing and air conditioning and waste, and all that stuff is going to have to be reimagined. The challenge, as you have felt in your own impact investing work, is that the narrative right now is looking one step ahead, and the one step ahead is growth. And we're going to grow the economy by using renewable energy, and that's going to mean we use less carbon. That is not happening. We are growing the economy by using more renewable energy and more coal and natural gas and more of everything. So we have to think, I mean, the real effective philanthropy, in my opinion, is going to look 2 or 3 steps ahead and plan for what is politically and socially unpopular now, but what's going to be necessary in the future. And part of that is your podcast at Dumbo Feather is educating and inspiring people to meet the future halfway. And the more people we have that understand this and have empathy and a pro-social outlook, the more that we can change the initial conditions of the future when these events unfold, as they've been doing a little bit, but they're probably going to accelerate later this decade. So I think we need a lot more people like you that understand this at a visceral and intellectual level, but still are cheerful and positive and roll up your sleeves and say, this is the time that I was born to impact the future. And I roll my sleeves up and play a role despite what we face. And we haven't really gotten into the what we face part, but it is a lot. I mean, there's a lot on the horizon with energy, finance, geopolitics, and the environment. And the natural reaction to hearing it is to shut down and focus on the present because it's too much. But the more people that understand it and care about it, then that gives us the opportunity to share. And like you said, what did you say at the beginning of this conversation? One of the things you value the most is having an authentic conversation with another human being about these issues. We need to scale that times orders of magnitude more, but not with the delusional flying platypus sort of solutions, but things that are more grounded in biophysical reality.
I want to talk about how like lately I've felt pretty crushed because people don't like to hear the truth, and when you go hunting for it like a truffle dog, you get in sticky situations with people's denial or anger and fury that you named that thing, that you said that truth. It's my truth. I'm not talking capital T. I'm just like trying to get to authenticity, trying to get to real connection where we're saying things honestly to each other. If I'm honest, like you said, depending on who's in front of you, depending on how many people are in front of you, depends on the degree to which you can actually speak authentically. I find that increasingly harder and harder. So the desire to retreat, like I just want to kind of like, I just want to retreat. You're like the Dumbo Feather podcast, educating and inspiring people to meet the future halfway. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe not. Like, it's hard. It's just hard to kind of lean in.
But what you're feeling, what you're describing, I guarantee you is being felt by the majority of your listeners and the majority of people listening to my podcast as well. This is what people are feeling. And to give voice to that, I don't know what it will do. To
give voice to what?
To talk out loud about how you're feeling and the struggles you have with telling the truth because you get slammed down by people who are business as usual or who are climate deniers or fossil advocates or whatever flavor they are. It is very, very difficult to navigate this socially. And the other challenge is, when I have a podcast and there's 100 comments, 95 of them are totally supportive and congratulatory and thankful. And 5 of them are, you're a freaking idiot. You know that the earth is always warm before. And it's not that one so much, but the five that are critical of me, I obsess about those more than the other 95. And that's just classic social psychology. We're all wired like that. And so speaking the truth in this time of complexity and systemic risk is very difficult, for sure. All right, how are we going to wrap this up, Mrs. Lieberman?
Well, because you got to do number 6 and 7, and then we're out. We did tribal, defend our group against everyone else. We've got 6 and 7 in the human aspects of human behavior.
And well, 6 was the belief systems, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we are kind of fanatical. We believe in what we've come to identify with, and if facts come across that differ with what we believe, we find it very difficult to change our minds. And this is a problem of our education system. It's a problem of the internet. It's a problem of politics and the media. And I worry that the way the algorithms are accentuating extreme views on the left and the right, and they upregulate things that you could never say in a group of 30 people sitting in a town hall meeting, but you can say on the internet, that unless the social media rules are fixed, we're not going to be able to have a conversation about these things that matter. So the number 6 thing is that belief and identity matter more than the truth. The 7th thing is that we are evolved organisms, and this evolutionary psychology is in each of us. Each of us have conserved algorithms in our brain for cooperation or competition, depending on how things are, but that our evolved behavior won't change in our lifetimes, Barry. It won't change in the next 300 years from now. These are hardwired over thousands and thousands of generations. But what can change is that humans coordinate and cooperate in groups, and those groups can be as large as countries, or right now a global economic growth tethered culture. That cultural evolution can happen orders of magnitude faster than human evolution. So if the culture changes, we will change with it, because the signals we get on how to get the neurotransmitters, the emotional states of our successful ancestors will change. For instance, we have always cared about status and comparing ourselves to others. 20,000 years ago, it was about who could tell a story, or who was kind, or a good hunter, or a shaman, or the good musician. Everyone had roughly the same amount of stuff, but people had different status depending on their standing in the tribe. There was a American Indian tribe called the Potlatch Indians in the state of Washington, that the status would be the chief who would give away the most wealth and throw the biggest feast for neighboring visitors. Like, they would give things away, and that's what made them high status and respected. Our current culture is having a shopping center, or the most digits in the bank, or the most Facebook or Twitter followers. More is correlated with status. But as we head to a resource-constrained world, there may be other things that are socially accepted. Like my students, a lot of them don't even have a driver's license. They don't have a car because they live in a city, and they can't afford a car. And so already the younger people are starting on their own to compete and compare themselves to other things than conspicuous consumption. In fact, there's a word in the younger generation called flex. And a flex means to show off your fancy watch, or your designer handbag, or your $200 shoes. And flex has a negative connotation, like you're showing off how wealthy you are and how cool you are. And that's like pushed back against. So in our ancestral world, there was something called strong reciprocity, which was, and this is in the animal world as well. If there's a silverback gorilla that beats up another gorilla just because he wants to, other gorillas will come to its defense. If that other gorilla is antagonistic towards the silverback and does something snarky, the other gorillas won't support him. So there's this deep sense of fairness and reciprocity in our ancestral world, where if someone does something that is unethical or wrong, people stand up and stand against it. But in our world, the economic system, the market, has become so powerful that people don't have that natural voice and that natural agency to fight back. But I think culturally we can change very fast, which I don't know how we're going to change, but cultural evolution is happens very fast, and it's very possible and very likely to happen in coming decades.